The roommate who never slept. I went to college in upstate New York in 2018. My freshman dorm was one of those older buildings that smelled like dust and had that constant hum from the old radiators. I didn't mind, though. It had character. I was assigned a random roommate named Evan, a sophomore who apparently didn't get along with his last one. When I first met him, he seemed normal. Quiet, pale guy, always wore a black hoodie no matter the weather. Mark budget SA, YA, YA, YA. But after a few weeks, I realized something strange. He never seemed to sleep. At first I thought maybe he was one of those late-night gamers or something. But even when I'd wake up at 3 or 4 in the morning to use the bathroom, he'd just be sitting on his bed, staring at his laptop, or sometimes just staring at the wall. No sound, no movement, just wide awake. One night around midterms, I stayed up late studying. Around 2 a.m., my eyes were burning, so I laid back in bed. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of the radiator. Then, I heard something. Evan whispering. At first, I thought he was talking in his sleep, but when I peeked over, he was sitting perfectly still, facing the wall, whispering something. The tone wasn't normal. It was fast, shaky, like he was repeating something over and over under his breath. I remember my heart racing. I grabbed my phone to text a friend, but froze when he suddenly stopped whispering and said, in a totally calm voice, "You should not be awake right now." I didn't move. He slowly turned his head, just enough for me to see one of his eyes looking at me through his hair. Then he smiled. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, he was gone. I was no longer than that field constantly. I hear the life. I had the library basement. I went to a small college in Ohio, one of those campuses that used to be a hospital decades ago. Our library was massive, and beneath it was a restricted basement level where they supposedly stored old records and broken furniture. My best friend Jenna and I worked part-time in the library, usually shelving books at night. It was always quiet after 9 p.m., just the faint hum of the lights and the occasional creak of the old floorboards. One night, our supervisor, Mrs. Graves, asked us to bring a cart of books downstairs to the storage area. She gave us a key and warned, "Don't stay down there long. Lights flicker sometimes." When we got down, it was freezing cold and smelled like mildew. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering every few seconds. It was just row after row of old shelves, boxes, and broken furniture. We were down there for about 5 minutes when we both heard what sounded like someone whispering behind one of the shelves. It was faint, but distinct. 2 voices, speaking in a rhythm, like chanting. I called out, thinking maybe someone else was working down there, but the whispering stopped instantly. We started pushing the cart back toward the elevator when Jenna gasped and pointed. There was a figure standing at the far end of the aisle. It looked like a person in old hospital scrubs, completely still. I called out again, but it didn't move. We turned and bolted to the elevator. When we got in, Jenna hit the button repeatedly, but before the doors closed, we both heard the sound of something running toward us, fast. The doors shut just as something slammed against them from the other side. The entire elevator shook. When we got back upstairs, Mrs. Graves looked pale when she saw us. She just said, "You didn't go past the red tape, did you?" We hadn't even seen any tape. She told us quietly that the basement used to be the old morgue from when the building was a hospital, and that the red taped section was where they kept the bodies before transport. The next day, the key we used was missing from her desk. She said she never gave it to us. The group project. During my junior year at a college in Michigan, I was taking a night class called Criminology and Society. The professor was known for being intense, especially when it came to group projects. He randomly assigned us into teams of 4, and our task was to create a case study presentation on a real-life unsolved crime. My group consisted of me, a girl named Ashley, and 2 guys named Daniel and Rob. We all got along, but none of us were particularly close. When it came time to pick a place to meet for our late-night work sessions, Daniel jokingly suggested the old East Hall building on campus. East Hall was notorious. Built in the 1920s, it had been one of the first dorms on campus, but it had been abandoned for renovations years ago. Some students swore they'd seen shadows moving in the windows, And there were even a few rumors about a girl who disappeared there decades ago. None of us were superstitious, so we laughed it off. We decided to meet there at 8 p.m. When we arrived, the building was mostly dark, except for a few flickering fluorescent lights along the hallway. The first floor had power, but everything else was cut off. Dust covered the floors, and the air smelled like mold and old wood. We spread our notes on a long table in the abandoned lounge and got to work. For the first half hour, it was mostly normal, discussing case facts, sharing our research. But then things started to feel off. It began with the sound of footsteps above us. At first, we ignored it, thinking it might have been the wind or the building settling. But soon, the footsteps became deliberate. Slow, heavy steps, pacing back and forth. Daniel laughed and called out, "Hello? Who's up there?" No answer. The footsteps stopped for a moment, and we all exchanged uneasy glances. Then they started again, this time louder and closer. "Maybe a janitor?" Rob suggested, though his voice didn't sound confident. Then we heard it, a soft humming, almost like a lullaby. It was coming from the hallway leading to the stairs. Ashley froze, whispering, "That's not a janitor. That's someone else." I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was just my imagination. But the humming didn't stop. It grew louder, closer, and more distinct. The tone was haunting, almost childlike, yet there was something deeply wrong about it. We decided to pack up and leave. As we headed toward the main hallway, the lights flickered and went out completely, plunging us into total darkness. I felt something brush against my shoulder, cold, like icy fingers running through my jacket. I jumped back, nearly dropping my notebook. Then Ashley screamed. I spun around and saw her frozen in the doorway, staring down the hall. My phone's flashlight barely cut through the darkness, but I followed her gaze and froze. At the end of the hallway stood a woman. She was tall, wearing a torn student uniform that looked decades old. Her hair was long and black, hanging limply in front of her face. She didn't move, just stood there, watching us. And then I saw her eyes. They were completely black. No whites, no pupils, just voids. My stomach dropped, and I could feel my pulse in my throat. We started running. My feet pounded against the wooden floor, but every step felt like it echoed 1,000 times. Behind us, I heard soft footsteps keeping pace, perfectly matching ours. "Keep going," I shouted. "Don't stop." We reached the main stairwell, and Daniel tried the door. Locked. Then we realized something. The exit we came in through had vanished. It wasn't even there. The hallway stretched longer than it should have, the shadows twisting unnaturally. Ashley tripped and nearly fell. I grabbed her hand and yanked her up, but when I looked back, I saw the woman was closer, gliding silently across the floor. She didn't walk. She seemed to float, her uniform brushing the ground as she moved. Rob whispered, "We gonna die in here." I don't know why I didn't scream back. I was frozen with terror. Finally, we stumbled into a small storage room, slamming the door behind us. It was cramped, filled with broken furniture and dusty boxes. We huddled together, trying to catch our breath, listening. Nothing. Silence. I risked looking out the small window in the door. The hallway was empty, the lights still out. But then, I noticed something on the floor. A single black shoe. Not broken, not old, just there. And behind it, a faint trail of wet footprints leading down the hall. We stayed in that storage room for what felt like hours. Eventually, someone, probably Daniel, found a loose panel near the ceiling. We climbed out, one by one, and finally found our way to the exit. When we emerged into the cold, it was right that we were thinking so much in the course of common war. We shaped the powers of the wars against each other. The next day, our professor sent an email. East Hall was closed indefinitely. No one was allowed inside for renovations. He didn't explain why. I found out later that a student named Margaret Ellis had disappeared there in 2003, last seen wearing her uniform, supposedly working on a group project late at night. None of us ever finished that project. I dropped the class the next semester. To this day, I can't shake the memory of her eyes, black as night, empty yet somehow aware. And sometimes,
When I'm alone in a dark building on campus, I swear I hear that humming again, soft, eerie, and so impossibly close.